do you find that your experience or the so-called BPD experience of falling in love is all that different from the normal, whatever the normal is? I don't even know if there is a normal experience, by the way.
I don't know about that either, but I mean, I know that I feel love in a very intense manner. It's supremely intense. There are times when I feel like I love bomb someone a bit. My fear of abandonment is quite a bit of I don't want to call it a problem actually, but it plays out in my friendships as well a lot. It has played out not the marriage, but in my past relationships with boyfriends as well.
Does it push them away from you? And it does. And do you think that fear also makes it such that you choose partners that are ultimately inadequate to your needs because you hold on to people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been lucky to have had friends who really truly understand me,
Yeah.
who took the effort to understand me and be there for me. But there have been those also who didn't get it, and they just ended up being pushed away, um, labeled me a lot, shamed me a lot, bullied me a lot as well.
In what
Just
way? And what was the trigger for the bullying, do you think?
um, I think
I mean, you must have been young if they were bullying you, right? People don't, in theory, do. I mean, people do it online, but
yeah, yeah, of course. Um, I think the trigger for the bullying was, let's say, I ended up just being in a delusional pattern for a while, and they didn't understand.
what was
And
what would be a delusional pattern? Can you give an
um,
example of what that looks like? Like, yeah, what does that look like? You mean you're perceiving things that aren't real about interpersonal details? Is that what is the delusional?
yeah, yeah,
So
that's
can you give can you give a specific example? I get it, by the way. I'm not, but can you give a
yeah.
specific, I get it. Can you give a specific example of like a delusional thinking pattern? And are you aware of it when you're doing it? I'm guessing not. It feels realer than real. Yeah, yeah.
No, I don't. I'm not aware of the delusional pattern when it's actually playing out. Um, and it just happens. Um, for instance, like this is what happened when I was younger and back in college, and I was friends with this one person, but I ended up taking a lot of his signals as dating signals, and that ended up being a delusion unto itself. So
Ah,
that's how fellow got pushed away. So yeah, that was a really crazy breakdown that ended up happening, or the episode that ended up happening.
interesting. Interesting.
Yeah,
Did you, in
yeah,
that instance, right, did you keep forcing the matter on the person so that,
I
and they felt, of course, unseen, right? Because
yeah,
you were not acknowledging who they say they, were in relation to you, which would push
absolutely.
someone away because then they're not allowed to be themselves.
Yeah, and that ended up to me being bullied eventually because obviously they were like, "What is she thinking? Is this what she's really thinking? Does she really mean this?" And then obviously one thing leads to another, and it all leads to gossip, and yeah, a debacle into itself. So that was a lesson learned the really hard way.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Do you think,
and
I think that in that instance, so you could have someone be very gentle and say, listen, it's just not this way.
yeah,
But you could also have someone be gentle and then the person, I'm not saying you did this, but is still unable to accept the reality they're presenting. And so you could understand they either have to just walk away. I mean, there's probably more mature ways to handle it, but you say lesson learned. Does that mean that, how did that teach you to become more other reflective? Like what did that do what mechanisms did that develop? Because I'm curious if you were able to figure out how to use that,
yeah, so
because it's painful too, I mean, obviously, but
very painful. Yeah,
yeah.
and I mean, this pattern was repeated earlier too, where I sought out, I didn't seek out attention exactly, a lot of people thought that this was just attention-seeking behavior. And it took me a long time to explain to them that, hey, it's not attention-seeking.
Mhm.
And it's when I was in therapy that I realized that it is just my fear of abandonment really playing out. And it's with therapy that I understood that when I was younger and a lot of sexual trauma ended up happening. And
Wow.
when I tried to talk to my parents about it, they didn't fully understand or they couldn't comprehend what's going on with me. My father, though I really love him a lot, he's a very critical person. He's really hard on me even today. It's taken a lot of work for me to understand that he means well. But when I was younger, him being hard on me didn't really go down well with me because I was extremely sensitive. So through therapy, I realized all this. And yeah, also I was the neighborhood that I was in, there were not a lot of people my age. So I didn't have a lot of friends. And that played out a lot in my conscience where I saw other people having friends and having people their age to interact with, but I didn't have them. And
Why do you
yeah, my parents,
why do you think
sorry.
you didn't have why do you think you didn't have a lot of friends? Why do you think you struggled in that way? What was it?
I think there were two factors that majorly played into this. One was that the locality that I lived in didn't have a lot of people who were my age. They were a decade or more older than me. There were a lot of older people. So I didn't have children my age. So that was one major factor. The other factor was that I was just weird. In school, I was just labeled as the weird person.
Huh.
She's just weird. She's just
Wow.
different. Yeah. She's not like any of us. I was very shy. I was not extremely social. I had a hard time striking a conversation. Even today, I do have a very hard time striking conversations with people, honestly speaking. Just, it's not my style to walk up to a stranger and just, you know, be friendly with them. It takes a lot. A
Mm-hmm.
lot. So yeah, I'm not the best in social gatherings, especially in big groups and weddings and those kind of scenarios. It just overwhelms me. So yeah, and also I'm extremely expressive. So I think
Right.
people just get out of that.
Right. So in other words, it's almost like what you're saying is you're someone who isn't as easily right. You're not as easily outgoing, but you're also simultaneously expressive, which seems like a paradox. It's not,
Yeah.
but people might interpret it as such. So your assessment is that people don't quite know how to jibe with those two things.
No, they don't. And the other problem is that when I do try to fit in, which I did during college and otherwise, um, when my teenage years kicked in and during my adulthood, and even now, when I try to fit in, it just becomes a task. And then my sense of self or my own belief system starts falling apart. So that's another challenge that I end up having to deal with. It's very hard for me to find my people or my tribe. I do find them, but they're few and far in between.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, it's always been this conflict within me in terms of, is it healthy for me to have so many friends? Am I a lone wolf? Should I be selective? Should I not? And over time, I've realized that maybe it's okay to not have too many friends, and maybe I should learn to be at peace with myself. It's been a long, long road to reach that point, but yeah, I am getting there slowly and steadily.
Do you have friends now? Do you have any good friends now?
I do. I do. I mean, say about 15, 20 of them, but
That ain't
they're,
nothing.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, they have accepted me for who I am and my authentic self and whatever this weirdness and all of that, if they just take it as it comes. They have been there through a lot of these breakdowns or episodes that I spoke about.
Do you feel like you see and understand them also? Do you feel, I mean, I would assume yes if they're sticking around, but that's important too, right? That you're not just understood, but that the other person feels understood by you. Do you feel
Absolutely.
you have the capacity to do that? Like, what's your sense with that?
I do. It's taken a lot of effort, but I've gotten there, and it's taken a lot of communication and conversation from both sides where they also keep telling me that we are not abandoning you. You do not need to feel that if we don't answer your call or we don't respond to your messages,
Mhm.
does not mean that we're abandoning you. And it took a lot of work in therapy also to understand that, you know, just somebody not being there at a particular point of time does not mean that they do not love you. That's, I think that's been my biggest drawback all the time, that I lean on people too much, way too much, be it friends or be it even family members. I'm extremely dependent on my dad, and it's not just for having them in my life, but it's also seeking validation out of them. Like I was saying, be it with my poetry or any other artistic work that I do, or even my own sense of self, I will constantly ask, do you think I can be amazing? Do you think I'm amazing? Do you think I'm good enough? Do you think I can do this? Do you think I can do that? And not relying on those opinions and actually believing in myself, it took a lot of time and a lot of effort.